Okay, hey there, and welcome to the Gaia podcast. This is episode 5 and the last of our emission that opens a conversation about the interaction between us and our technological habits. I'm Mary, and I'm with Team Orange around my table. Hi, guys, could you introduce yourselves in the way you know how to do it?
Hi, I'm Richard from the Central IT Security Function and Nestle.
Hello, I'm Emma from the UK, research agency for Nestle.
Hi there, I'm Sam from Nestle UK. I'm the digital manager.
Hello, I'm Matteo from the San Pellegrino SBU in charge of websites.
Perfect, guys. So maybe we can start off with a few questions. Who could explain to us and to the group what 3D printing is in a few words? This is the first question for every group.
So I think 3D printing is about using a kind of machine to print objects. So it could be, let's say, something innate like a knife or a fork, or it could be something more advanced, such as perhaps sort of medicines in the future. I think they're looking at those sorts of technologies and other, not necessarily cars because they're probably too big to print, but maybe like kind of pieces for your car. So it could be like your wing mirror or your bumper, for instance.
Yeah.
It's somewhat analogous to the way rocks form in the ocean, because essentially we deposit material in layers, and those layers build up. You may need to heat them to solidify it, but it's essentially layering chemicals or other materials to produce a three-dimensional object.
Yeah, that's really technical. I'm really impressed, actually.
Said the chemistry graduate about 40 years ago.
I think just to add, there was, I think when 3D printing first was the scene, like, I don't know how long ago it was now, but there was a lot of concern around the printing of guns. So I think that was a really huge issue. I think it hasn't quite had that much traction in terms of people actually using 3D printing. I think probably the cost of having a 3D printer and the materials and technology probably hasn't caught up quite to what people are expecting to be. But it certainly was an interesting kind of food for thought in terms of how potentially someone could actually take a schematics from the internet and then print out a weapon. So I think that's definitely really interesting food for thought.
We won't monopolise this, don't worry. Actually, what is interesting, sorry again, science guy, it turns out that 3D weapons are most dangerous to the people who print them because they haven't been able to use materials which are strong enough to cope with the explosion from the bullet.
So back to a little bit joyful topic. I think 3D printing probably can bring loads of fun for kids and can print the toys, and maybe in the future if they can produce something quite reasonable, affordable for the family, and maybe kids can design their own car and print a little car toy for themselves.
Oh yeah, that's so cute.
And well, as San Pellegrino, I must talk about food. It's in my mission. I'm paid for this. So food-wise, I have seen a couple of videos. I think mainly PR stunts, but maybe for the future, there is the possibility of 3D printing food. And well, one of the most first things you can think of is spaghetti, because it's just something that comes out of the machine. But there's also the pizza, for example, because the dough can be printed, and then the tomato, the mozzarella. So not sure about at the moment the quality of the stuff that comes out, so it's not really fine food, but I think it's an interesting direction that 3D printing is taking.
Yeah, actually, I've read a few articles saying that they're starting to 3D print artificial hearts that are able, well, that will be soon able to replace the real thing for people who are actually in need of a heart. We're really getting thrown out of here. Do you hear? Every song over here is really tough for us to deal with, for me actually, with the mics, but well. Okay, so yeah, so I think for my part that 3D printing could really help humanity move forward and in a really interesting way of getting better physically talking, but that also kind of touches the subject of transhumanism, you know, and how much of a man is, I see you looking, how much of a man is actually himself, and how can science actually improve the life of the human being and in his body and maybe in his mind, if we're talking about artificial intelligence and this kind of things. So are these things that resonate with you? Like, do you imagine a future where a man could be half 3D printed, for example? Like,
I'm not too sure. I mean, I think it's still pretty early days with 3D printing. I mean, I think there's definitely use cases for in the future being able to kind of, especially from a kind of health perspective, kind of be able to print out, you know, various, you know, as you mentioned around the heart and limbs and different things. So there's definitely use cases for. I think we're just probably still very early in the process, and I don't know about the adoption. I think it's one of those things where it was a big bang a few years ago. Everybody was talking about 3D printing. I don't know how. I guess in terms of with technology, obviously the initial cost is going to be pretty high, and then it will come down as new manufacturers come on board, as it becomes easier, the technology improves. But I feel that we're still away from actually reaping the full benefits from it in terms of longevity and whether it can help us, I guess, increase our lifespan. I think that's an open-ended question, because obviously you've got to have materials that help to kind of create whatever element you're using. I think we're pretty scarce in terms of resources across the world, so I think in terms of the longevity piece, I'm still a bit sceptical as to how that can happen. But I guess with technology and advancement, there's opportunities to do so. But I think for me personally, the jury is kind of still out on that.
okay, really interesting.
I think on the medical side, even if it's used for replacement organs, that kind of purpose will be very heavily regulated for years. It's essentially, if you look at what's done with drugs now with the FDA, etc. I think for me one of the biggest advantages is it actually lowers the barriers for entry for delivering things, because my father-in-law is a mechanical engineer and trained as a tool maker many years ago, and to do all that stuff requires high precision technology. So I could see, and I think it's an ideal solution for the maker generation, because they want to have ideas that they might want to cheaply prototype, see if it works. If it doesn't, throw away and try another one. And I think companies could set up a business providing that kind of expertise.
Amazing.
So for me, to go a little bit further, a little bit scary if you think you can print a human being, or you can print a dog or cat and integrate it with artificial intelligence, and that means the new Black Mirror is coming back to the reality, because it's true. For example, if you can choose a 3D printed dog as a cat, and then they don't have to ruin your sofa and to damage your shoes, that would be ideal. But then you lost loads of like joy, like you integrated with the real dog.
Yeah, of course.
So that's my argument.
I think we're really too far away, really, from what I was trying to describe. Artificial intelligence is very different, I believe, from human brain, it's missing quite a lot. On the other side, 3D printing of human limbs, bones, or whatever is a great opportunity. Anything that can help a person in need or in health, I mean, anything that can help is really should be done. I think we should accelerate this.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. I think that when it comes to the application here, I think it's going to be mainly within sort of the institutions like hospitals, etc. I think that's where these 3D printing is going to really take its hold. I think from a consumer or household perspective, I think it will be a bit of a slower adoption because you have to have this machinery. There's lots of issues around costs, etc. And there is going to be regulation, so you won't just be able to just print whatever you want to print. I think the government will definitely have some thoughts around what should be done because we can't have people just printing guns, for instance, or whatever they want, some sort of knife. And then we know how like knife crime is rising in the UK, and it's become a massive problem. And if someone could have just a 3D printer and automatically print a knife, that's going to be a serious issue. So I suspect that there will be heavy government regulations if it comes into place where people can actually start to print items from their own home.
Guys, I'm really sorry, but I think we should really stop there, but this is so interesting. We could keep this conversation going at dinner if you want later today, or if you get to my group later to continue this workshop, we could continue this, but right now I have to say goodbye for now. Thank you so much for your time, Team Orange. You've been amazing and really interesting about everything we talked about. I hope you had a little bit of fun and that it was a last but peaceful last workshop for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.